Hi, and thanks for joining us. My name is David Penn, Research Analyst with the Finovate Group. Joining me today is Mr. Alex Linter. He is the President of Experian's Consumer Information Services Division, and we're going to be talking a little bit today about financial empowerment in general and Experian's commitment and mission of helping provide better access to credit for consumers. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's just start off at the top. I heard you say, we had a fireside chat the other day that we were involved in, and I heard you say that there are over 100 million people in the United States who don't have access to fair credit today. And as we said, one of Experian's main missions is to not just help people build credit, but to get better access to credit. And I thought maybe we could start there.
All right. So what you have is you have 100 million people who the industry calls thin file or no file customers. So they have no lending history. And as such, the traditional methods for evaluating whether they're qualified for other forms of credit, the Main Street forms of credit, don't work. So you have to use different data. You have to learn things about them that are not related to loans that they had previously taken. And so at Experian, we regard ourselves as the consumer's bureau. We want to make sure that we work for everybody, not only for those people who are already well established, but for everybody. Now, the type of people, when you think 100 million people, you will immediately recognize by the number, it's not only people living on the fringe. It's everybody. For example, when you turn 18, initially you don't have a credit history. Well, how do you build that? Or if you're an immigrant, I'm an immigrant. How do you build credit history when you first come into the country? And there is none here in the US. So it's taking care of everybody so they get access to fair credit as much as they should.
No, excellent, excellent. And great points about how broad that is. That we're not just talking about young kids, but as you mentioned, for people who might have been professionals and come over to the United States and have to start from scratch.
Exactly. Got plenty of those here in Silicon Valley.
Indeed, indeed. And we're fortunate too. I wanted to talk on that score about technology's role in all of this. Being at a FinTech conference, we know that technology has the power to really accelerate financial inclusion and success. Can you share some of the enabling technologies that you think are going to help consumers gain access to credit?
Well, so what we want to do is we want to empower the consumer to contribute the data that describes them appropriately and that allows them to create a score or boost a score. And that word is critical. We've launched an offering called Experian Boost. Experian Boost, you may have seen it on television. Experian Boost essentially allows a consumer to provide online banking credentials so that they can add their utility payments and their cell phone payments to their credit file. They were always intended to be part of their score, but the utility and cell phone companies haven't contributed it. So now we allow the consumer to say, hey, if it's not in my file, I'd like to contribute it. So if you are, for example, an 18-year-old who is about to go to college, you know, you're going to pay your utility bill. Even if you live in a dorm, you're going to have a cell phone. There's almost 2 cell phones per person in the US. And therefore, those payments are ubiquitous. Almost everybody has them. And that can be a start for them to build a file. And if you already have a file, even then it adds what the industry calls a trade line to the file. And so it makes the scoring more accurately. And for 70% of people, it actually boosts their score. It increases their score. Entirely consumer permissioned. If they want to add it, they can. If they want to retract it later, they can. It's their choice.
Interesting.
So Experian Boost. And we have a second initiative with our friends from FICO. They are building a score called Ultra FICO. And Ultra FICO uses the same technology, account aggregation, to allow the consumer to give permission through their online banking application for FICO to go in and look at that cash flow. And then Ultra FICO takes the cash flow into account and also creates a special score called the Ultra FICO score, so that at the point of lending, people can have the best score possible.
Yeah, interesting. Particularly interesting with Boost, the way that it involves the consumer themselves. It has them the ability to really be empowered in the process of improving their own circumstance.
That's right. That's right.
Very, very interesting. You mentioned also, of course.
By the way, not new, if you think about it. We contribute data to so many things. We contribute data to Facebook, we contribute data to LinkedIn, we contribute data to many social platforms. Why not contribute data for your own benefit so you can boost your score?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I was talking with Boost. You mentioned the work that you've done with FICO and the partnership there. I thought that would be another interesting thing to talk about. The importance of partnerships for Experian, working with other fintechs and things like that. What kind of role does that play?
The fintech community is the community that has driven innovation into financial services. That is certainly true today, but it has been true for a while.
Right.
If you think about where online banking came from, if you think about where the first credit card came from, the first credit card came from the airline industry, American Airlines together with the International Air Transport Association. So often comes from the outside, and the fintech world is essentially people who are not part of the traditional banking or financial services world, who have a different idea of where they can source capital and how they can reach the consumer. Many of them pay attention to frictionless processes, and that innovation is for the benefit of the consumer. And the fintech industry overall is looking, the financial services industry overall is looking at the fintech players to bring that innovation, and they're adopting it either through partnerships or through vendors like ourselves. So we look at the fintech industry of serving them, giving them the data that they need. We look at the fintech industry to partner with us so we can bring it to Main Street financial services if they don't feel that's competitive. Right. And we look at the fintech industry as inspiration, frankly, to what can happen next.
Wow.
How can we think differently about things to make financial services overall a better experience for the consumer.
Interesting. That sounds like an extremely healthy relationship with all of that sort of back and forth.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at that then, sort of as by way of wrapping up perhaps, the future of that relationship. What are some of the things, how do you see the relationship between Experian and the fintechs in, say, the coming months, the coming years?
Well, I think the relationship will expand because we're going to expand the data that we make available. We are traditionally a credit bureau, but I would say we have evolved. There's many alternative data sources. We talked about it earlier when we talked about people with no file. How do you score them? The fintech industry is embracing that. It's also how we deliver the data to fintechs. They want immediate response. Think about Boost. Boost allows a person to enter their data and their score will immediately improve. Near real time, like in 2 seconds is the average, 2.2 seconds is the average response. But that's unheard of. No other bureau does that. We want to bring more of that kind of a capability to the fintech industry, and the response has been unbelievable, fantastic, really. And so we think our relationship is going to grow. Oh,
fantastic. It does sound interesting and definitely something for all of us to be looking forward to.
Thank you very much, David.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Had a great conversation with you at the Fireside Chat and a great conversation with you today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for being here.